going to develop, we are going to develop a small web application. That is what our goal, right? At the end of our course also we need to know how the web applications get developed, right? So with the help of the basic J2E core technologies, JSP, servlets and JDBC, we know how to connect to the database by this time. And so three parts, JDBC for backend and servlets for server side logic slash slash controller. We can say how the request need to be handled, where the request should be redirect to which server, which request should be served by which servlet. All this can be done by servlets. And Java server pages for UI. Okay, so basically client will, in the UI he will say username, password, all the stuff, and when he entered all these username, password, and when he submit login, you go all the way, and that login flow will be triggered to login servlet, and in the login servlet you will talk to the JDBC, and JDBC you will verify whether it is there in JDBC, whether it is there or not. You can see, then if it is, the data is there, then you will say we'll just display some dummy successful page saying okay, your login has been successfully processed, and please proceed to the we provided you we validated your authentication details, so you are very well allowed to go through the login application. If he provided wrong details, we can say, hey, you provided the wrong details, so please go and register. And we'll, in the register page, we'll ask the customer to enter username, password, his date of birth, his email address, and his permanent address, blah blah blah. And once he registered, we can store into the database. Make sense? Okay, cool. So so servlets, what are servlets? What it will do, right? Basically the servlet is a technology from Java or Sun which used to develop server-side components. Okay, to develop server-side components, servlets comes into picture. Okay, servlet as a server-side component, it is responsible to receive the request from the client and process the request and send the response back to the client. Okay, here some new terminologies, right? So don't think too much. Okay, when you type, okay, when you type Google Finance, this is the client. The web browser is Chrome browser is client, and the Google server that is sitting in the back end, right, that is server. The Google data that processed and provided this output, right? So this is the input. Google.com/finance is the input. As soon as it went like this, so Google will be identified as a host in the internet world, and corresponding server will be recognized, and then in that you are looking for finance application in Google, so it will go all the way Google application, and Google is smart enough to detect your login, so based on that it will display all your stocks related stuff. Okay, so your web browser web browser. This is the server. I'll explain, don't worry. Server. This is the web container. Web containers. Web container is part of the server. When we say server, in our case, as of today, we know Tomcat server. Tomcat is a server. And we are running server on 8080 in local system. So when you say Google Finance or something, it will go all the way. So that is what I'm saying. When somebody try to register your application, then you need to go all the way the request to the corresponding servlet. Servlet will be here. Your servlet program will be here. And it will take the request, it process it and return it back. And the response data will be displayed here. Okay, so servlet is the one, is the server side component, a technology that has been developed to serve on the server side component, which will take input from the client and process the response, process the data and reply back. Okay, so the request that it comes here, the response it goes here, these are all called, this is called a request, this is called response. What kind of request it is? HTTP request. HTTP response. Okay, so HTTP runs on TCP IP protocol. HTTP runs on TCP IP protocol. Just keep listening these keywords. Okay, don't too much worry about all these things. Okay, just focus, just understand. Okay, data is, when I ask for some data, I need to provide some input so that server will understand what I'm asking and the server will respond back, right? Anyways, basically in typical, right, when you go to restaurant, you provide the input, right? What is the input? What from the menu, what items you want, right? You are not going to select complete menu. You are going to select the specific order that you want. That is the input that you provide. What restaurant guys will do? They will take the request from you and they will go in the kitchen, they prepare and they process and they prepare your menu, they prepare your request, then they prepare your order and then return back with the prepared stuff onto your table, right? That's what, it's a typical thing, just a common sense way of understanding. Okay, so basically this request we call it as HTTP request and response is HTTP response. So HTTP request and response are runs on TCP IP protocol. Okay, basically TCP is controls the data, how the data should be processed and if you know how to keep the data kind of thing. IP is carries data. Okay, IP is the internet protocol, is the one which carries the data. Okay, so in a simple way, web server, web browser, in our case web browser is, where is this? Yeah, in our case web browser is the one responsible. Web browser is basically used to send the request data and is responsible to take the response given by the web server. Web server is responsible to receive the request given by the web browser and send the response back to web server, web browser. Okay, it's just taking, so sending the request and accepting the response is browser's responsibility. Accepting the request, sending the response is server web server responsibility. Okay, okay, so basically what exactly happens, right? How this will when you ask for login, how it is going to identify your request, how your server is exactly identifies it is a login page or register page, or is it something else, is it a correct one or not, how this server or Tomcat server or web server or servlet can detect, right? That is the thing that we need to understand very well. Okay, so basically what happens, the best way to do this thing is, yeah, let me quickly explain the diagram and start programming rather than just too much theory doesn't help you this. So this is the client or web browser. Okay, okay, this is the web server, and inside we'll have servlets, all the stuff. Okay, so let's say here you try to access, you first you identify, in order to identify server you need to know the host and IP address. So this is running on particular host and particular IP address. This server is running on particular host and particular IP address. So sorry, particular host and particular port number. Okay, web server runs on web server runs on specific host and port. So Google runs on where? Google.com runs on Google host and default port is 80. If you don't mention the port number in the URL, then it is 80. Looks like they are not allowing it 8080 or something. They may be running different port or like, yeah. So they are running on 443. They are running on 443. I mean, at least when you try to access Google/443, then it will try to identify. Okay. So here you enter, let's say, your name and you submitted. See, and submit. Submit button will be there. As soon as you submit the button, the request will go all the way to container. Okay, a request go to, so this is the request one. Okay, all the way to the container. You will say like, login.html. This login.html will be mapped to, simply remember, your heart of the web server. Any web server program, heart of the web server, any app server sees web.xml. Okay, your server doesn't understand your code. Okay, first thing simple, your server doesn't understand your code. Your server understands web.xml file. Whatever you configure in this file, based on that your web server reacts. Whatever you configure in web.xml, based on that your web server reacts. Okay, so in web.xml you need to configure your servlet programs, your servlet details. Okay, you need to, in web.xml you need to configure all your servlet related configuration. So your request file first will go to web.xml. Web.xml will parse your request and identifies corresponding servlet, and it will trigger the corresponding servlet class. And servlet class have different HTTP methods. Okay, different HTTP methods. Those are get, post, delete, and service. There are couple more are there. These are important. Okay, these are HTTP method based on. Okay, how HTTP methods are relates to is like this. CRUD operations, you know, right? So create is tied up with get. Sorry, post. Read or slash select tied up with get, and update is tied up with put, and delete is tied up with delete. Okay, these are the HTTP methods that has been available. So whenever you're doing operation, right, from client side, when you are registering, what you're doing, you are creating the data in the server, right, in the database. So that is not, for that you need to use post. Let's say you're validating username and password. Then what you will do, you will take the input and you go to the database and verify it. So that is get. You get the information that is available in the database and you validate against the input that has been provided by the client. Okay, let's say there is an edit button on the UI in the profiles. If you go to any of the servers, you can edit your information, right? So for that, put method updating. Delete is typical delete method. Okay, so in the life cycle, right? Um, Give me 1 second, I'll explain. Let's do program. It's and then it's easy for me to explain as well. So this is our JDBase program. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create new Maven project. Okay, the Maven project is called um, I'm going to select a web app because this is web application. I'll call it as batch. I don't know if I can use any number. Okay. Batch for servlets JDBC program. Okay, so we can remove this guy. Okay, it's created the structure, right? So what I'm going to do here, first thing main, you need to go and create the folder Java. Okay, so when you create Java folder here, it will automatically appear here. Okay, so this is where you're going to create the packages. Package. So before creating the package, what is the group ID we give? We just need to see. This is the group ID we give, right? Okay. Package name dot servlets, servlet, not servlet, batch 4. It's okay, batch 4 is enough, right? Okay. What am I doing? I just need to create a package. That's it. Okay, package has been created. Okay, good. So if you go to the structure, right? If you come to web app, this is the structure template, right? If you go to web end, you will see web.xml. So currently it is empty. Everything is empty. It just the parent tags are. This is the XML way of doing it. Okay. If you don't know XML, please read W3 schools quickly. It may not take you, even if you spend half an hour, you'll understand. Okay, this is the tag, corresponding start tag, end tag. Okay, inside you can do whatever you want. So here is the heart of your program. So what you're going to do here, what are the facilities, what in order to servlets program work, what we need to do is, there are a couple of tags that has been given by, there are a couple of tags that has been provided by Tomcat server and web web.xml configuration. So one of them is you need to servlet. So start tag and end tag. Inside servlet we have servlet name and servlet class. Okay, this is one tag. Another tag I'll show you. Don't worry, just focus first. First day it will be little confusing or a little scary, but it's nothing. It's very simple. Okay, servlet mapping and corresponding subsection is servlet name and URL pattern. Okay, so for each servlet there will be corresponding mapping, and each servlet tag will take servlet name and servlet class, and servlet mapping will take corresponding, it will map with servlet name, same servlet name unity. What is the pattern? What is the pattern you want to use? Okay, okay, good enough. So what we can do here, let's write about register. Okay, so first time we are, if somebody comes to our web application, they want to register, right, before see anything inside. So let's say you can call it as servlet name as anything, whatever the way you want to register. Okay, more of an understandable way. Okay, and what is the package? I mean, what is the servlet class? You need to give fully qualified name of the servlet class. Okay, so what is the fully qualified name? com.bellinfo.batch4, and then I'll say servlet dot, this is the class name I'm going to create. Okay, register servlet. Okay, so what we need to add here, servlet name, same servlet name we need to have. Okay, so what is the URL pattern? What is the URL pattern? If somebody says http localhost 8080 slash login.do, if somebody says register.do, then this URL will be triggered, corresponding register server register name will be identified. From register it will go to corresponding servlet section and it will identify the register servlet. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is here register.do. That's it. Okay, there are another section. You can write as many servlets as you want. Okay, so we are going to write two things, right? One is for login, one is for register, and we need to have for, you don't need to give the gaps, but better understanding, I'm just doing login, you can call it as, so you can say it as login servlet. Okay, so login So if somebody says in the URL, as we are deploying in the local, right, HTTP localhost 8080 slash login.do. Okay, let's say this guy doesn't understand. So whenever we say this login.do will be resolved to this guy and corresponding servlet name will be identified, and when it identified, corresponding servlet will be, it will reach this corresponding servlet and it identifies corresponding login servlet class. So you need to write this login servlet class and you need to write all the business logic there. You need to take the request, you need to process the response, all the stuff, and then return it back. Okay, yeah. So now let's go back. So we're done with web.xml. Okay, for now. So I'm going to write a new class, two classes, right? One is register.servlet. So it is there in servlet package. Okay, so I need to create another package, batch4.servlet. So servlet is the package I need to create. Dot servlet. Remember, all the package name should be smaller letters. So I need a register servlet class. And another one is login servlet. Okay. So if you look at these two classes, right, what are this? They are typical simple register servlet. The name sounds servlet, but where is the servlet, right? Simple class, right? How do you get the behavior? So how do you get the connection in database, JDBC? How do you get the connection? How do you load the driver classes? How do you get the prepare statements? How do you get the statements in JDBC? They are all built-in packages. Which package it is? Java.sql. Just like that, for servlet also they have a package called HTTP. I mean Java X dot servlet, Java X dot servlet package. All the J2E related, not Spring. Okay, J2E related Java will be in there in Java X servlet. Okay. Okay, so let's do how to. So if I try to extend, in order to make your simple class as a servlet class, what you need to do, you need to extend as your web application runs on HTTP. So you need to extend HTTP servlet. So it giving error. So let me see what if there is any recommendations. It doesn't have any recommendations. Why is it so? Because your pom.xml doesn't have any dependency libraries, and at max you have what kind of support? Java 8 support. Java 8 libraries you have in your batch in this project. You don't have Java 8 doesn't have a Java X package. Java X package will be downloaded as a separate jar. Okay, so you need to write the dependencies here, right? So what is the best way to write the dependency? Dependency group ID and artifact ID and what version you are looking for. There are different versions, right? So group ID is Java X dot servlet. Artifact ID, I know you can look at it in Google. I mean, in Maven it will say Java X servlet artifact ID. It will give it to you. So as I'm aware, just going to do servlet hyphen API. This is the artifact ID. And there are different versions, 2.5, 3.5 also there. I'm just using 2.5 for the time being. Okay. as I tried and it's worked for me. We don't need to end up while doing programs in errors. Just waste of energy, right? Okay, that is good. Let's see. It's building. Now if you go to your register servlet class, if you go and ask available packages, import http servlet javax.servlet.htp. I'm just saying http. Okay, this http servlet, see, these are the different methods that has been available. Do get, do post, do head, do get last modified, do put, do post, do delete, do options, service, do trace. These are all the different methods that has been there in the HTTP servlet. Okay, that has been there in the service. And what it is do, it will do the request method and it will identify and will process it, blah blah blah. It's, but you need your servlet need to now, this servlet, HTTP servlet will work for generic. So you need to override your HTTP servlet required method so that it will accept your inputs and you can process your input. You can do your own logic and return back the response and compile the response and return it back to the client, right? So now it became a register, it got the HTTP servlet behavior into this register servlet. Okay, you got HTTP servlet request behavior into register servlet. So there are different methods to override, right? So as this is the create, registration is the create, so I am going to do with post. Okay, public void. What I am doing here, all I am doing is overriding. HTTP. Okay, just for the sake of you guys better understanding, I'll go here. Do post. If I take this guy as is, what does it mean? If I do this guy as is, I can say public, right? Because I can use higher version of higher access modifier. It's protected there. I will use public. Okay. Okay. Here, what are you going to do? So now, if you come back here, your web.xml, like basically in register servlet, right? So what register servlet is, if client provides some input, username, password, all the stuff, email, all the stuff, and the data will be traveled through request object, HTTP request object, and from HTTP request object, you need to retrieve the data and keep it in your and process it. That's what we need to do, right? So here by overriding, you got the request object and response object, right? So all you need to do is, let's assuming the request object will have data, we'll see how the data will go into the request parameter, request object, when we are doing about JSP. So request dot get parameter. What is the parameter you need to give? Same parameter name you need to give. So the naming should be very properly maintained. Whatever the data that you send in JSP should be same here. Okay. Request dot get parameter, and what and all we are going to register, what and all the data. Let me repeat and copy paste it. Let's say I'll use full name and then email and then username, password, and password, confirm password. Okay, something like that, confirm password. So this is the information that client enters. So I'm going to take into some string simple, name, email, login, pass. Okay, so let's assume our screen is like on the UI we are going to build, don't worry. So our UI is something like this, where you have like, username, text box, and email, text box. So it's like full name, okay, and username, text box, password, text box, and confirm password, another text box. This is something like that, and then you will have a submit button, right? So by taking all the information, you will, when you submit, you carry all this information. So one thing you can do before checking in the database, before registering in the database, whether he entered the proper username, proper passwords like 2 times or not, right? To make sure the password has been, confirmed password has been properly entered or not. So you can verify, right? So what you can do, your business logic. This is the business logic I am saying. String validation equal to null for the time being. So what we can say, if password, this is the pass, sorry, if pass dot equals of validates pass. If it is, not equal, right? If they both are not equal, what we can say? We can simply say to the customer, validation, I'll show you, validation. You can simply say to the customer that passwords doesn't match. Make sense? You don't need to save. Before saving it, you need to verify, right, whether they entered proper use case or not. This is one use case. Okay. So let's say this validation is null. If it doesn't enter inside, it will be still null, right? So what we can do, if validation is not null, if validation is not null, then you can set into request dot set attribute. There are set attribute validation info, some attribute name, and what is the value, validation. So so by this time you get to know whether this validation is having null value or password doesn't match. If it is not null, which means it entered inside here, so you can set request dot set attribute equal to validation null. Let's say he entered proper password for both validate password and pass. So what we can do then? Else, so that scenario, what if he provided all the information correctly and password and validation password also correctly provided? Then what we need to do? Here is the interesting thing we need to do. You need to write a new object, new Pojo class, that is called registration details. And this registration details is going to have what? What is this registration is going to have? It's going to have typical our Pojo private string full name. We'll just give full name, private string email, private string username, private string password. This is the information when somebody registers going to save. So if they are private, what we're going to do? We need to generate setters and getters. Hey guys, can you guys able to hear? You guys there? Hello? Okay. So we created, this is the data that we need to store in the details page. So in registration servlet class, what we need to do, you need to fill the registration object. So by calling registration details, reg details equal to new registration details. This is the object that you need to create, and you need to populate these values, whatever the values that you got from the request, into this object. That is how your client data has been mapped into your Java object. Okay. Dot set full name dot set email dot set username dot set password. So this is the name. What is happening? You don't have registration details as full name. Set full name you have, right? Class and login ID. Oh, it's a sector, right? Yes, sir. Okay, sorry. So now your client details has been reached here. Okay. Now what we need to do? You need to pass it to the database. Right? You need to pass it to the database. How do you call the database? How do you store in the database? We have the store logic, right? We wrote just now earlier in the earlier programs. So let me copy paste that. So I'm going to create another package called to store the data, right? Package. Yeah, I'll create two packages. Okay. com dot bellinfo dot batch4 dot basically database connections, right? Whatever the logic that you do with the database, that you will call it as a repository. Okay, repository. That is another package I'm going to create. Okay, and one more package also I'm planning to create. Tell you why. Dot model. Okay, so this registration details will go into model package. Okay. Okay, so here you have all the servlet class. Here you're going to have, there is a class called, I'm going to write JDBC related stuff, that we call it as repository PAO, data access object. Okay, so this is where you're going to have all the DB logic. I'm going to as we did already in the earlier program. So I'm going to take this logic, all the logic, okay, whatever we have here. I'm just taking all the logic as is. I'm going to copy paste there. Instead of user info, what you need to call it is, when somebody calls save registration, this is where they are going to call, what is the registration details, right? Registration details and some naming conventions. Apart from that, nothing. Get username. Yeah, everything looks good. So what I'm going to do, so now we got how many classes? Login, register servlet will populate all the details into registration details. You need to pass this registration details to repository DAO so that when you call this guy save registration, this guy will go and save into the database. Make sense? So what we're going to do, this is where we need to write some customizable logic. Some customizable logic kind of like once you got all the registration dot all the objects, so you need to pass it to, you need to create repository DAO equal to new repository DAO, sorry, new repository DAO rep DAO. So from repository DAO dot save registration. So by passing this registration details, okay, so this guy will return int, right? So which means saving, if the result is 1, right? If it is getting saved in the database, it will return 1, you know, right? We discussed earlier about it. If it is not saved, it will return 0. So if it is 1, then it saved successfully, and you need to tell the user, hey, I saved into the database successfully, so you good to go, you can log in. So what we need to do, you need to take the value into int, here again result, this will return repository.save registration, it will return the data back, and if result is 1, then what you need to do, you need to, in order to set the data, back to the server, you need to set it back into the set attributes. You need to use set attribute, get attributes, okay? In order to get the data from the client, you need to use get parameter, you need to use, but in order to set get parameter, or there is no set parameter, but in order to set the data, you need to use set attribute, okay? So request dot set attribute, this will take what is the name of the attribute and what's the result. If it is 1, what does it mean? If it is 1, what does it mean? I'll say validation info, sorry, then I'll say your registration is successful, else request dot set attribute, same validation info, fail to store in the database, please try later. This is what we're going to display. And you've kept it into the request. There is a concept called request dispatcher. Okay, there is a class called built-in class called request dispatcher. So once you set this request, so you need to call request dispatcher rd equal to request dot get request dispatcher. What is the successful page you need to show? Don't worry, I mean we will definitely understand, but just for now, just see that successful page is, I call it as the registration status page, status dot JSP. Okay, and then request, you need to forward it. So forward it back so that it will, request will be forwarded back to, I mean response will be sent it back to client. Okay, so just comma response RESP, sorry. I hope you guys are following. Okay, so did you guys anything at least understand 10 to 15% here? So what we did as of now is, we are assuming there is a JSP page which will have registration details, username, full name, email, username, password, and submit button. As soon as you submit the button, I'll call the web server. I'll show you how to call that, don't worry. I'll call the web server, and inside web server we have a servlets web app. Our application is running. Inside our application there is a called web.xml, which will internal understand, in order to your program, your application and your server, your Tomcat server, your web server and your application, how these two communicate. They communicate through web.xml page. Web.xml is the only way that your server will understand. So in your web.xml you will configure what and all the servlet classes that you wrote. Okay, and which servlet class should be mapped to which request. If somebody sent register, it will map to register, so that you will configure such a way in web.xml. And if somebody configure for login, you will write for login. If somebody configure for update, you will configure for update servlet. From there it will go to your code, and while it is going, so this information will be carried as a request object, and you don't need to worry about how the request object has been created and how the data has been, how this username, first name, password has been set into the request object. How come just by asking request.get parameter full name, how come my servlet class able to get the full name value that client enters? That is something you don't need to worry. That is something a commonly used functionalities that has been built inside the servlet HTTP servlet classes. Okay, and then you, from there onwards, it's your typical logic. Once your request has been reached your application, then from there onwards it's your responsibility what you want to do with the what you want to do with that data. So what we did here, we took all the user entered information into our local variables, and then we quickly did a quick validation whether password and validate password both are same or not. If it is not valid, if it is not, we'll saying like password doesn't match, and that result will be setting into the set attribute, request set attribute. If that is not the case, we are keeping all these request provided inputs onto register details page, register details object, and you creating repository DAO. That DAO is having all the JDBC related connections and saving into the database. I'm passing this register details object into this save registration, and you know what will happen when you call this guy. It will get the connection, it will prepare the statement, and it will insert into the database, and it will say if it is success 1, if it is failure, it will return. If it is successful, it will return 1. If it is failure, it will return 0. So all you will, based on the result what we got, if it is 1 you will say successful. If it is if it is not, if it is not 1, then we can say failed to store in the database, please try again later. Okay, so just this is not going to help us anything, just want to show you quickly. Okay, just want to show you quickly how to deploy, so that we can do tomorrow remaining part. Okay, so first thing what we need to do, any application, Maven build, what you want, clean install. Okay, that is what my request is. Perfect, so the build has been successful. So if you go to servers, now you don't have anything, right? Let me right click on the server, add or remove. Now it will show batch 4 JDBC servlets. You just select that one, add it. If server is started, so I'm just asking, yes, server is running, so just go ahead and publish it. So as it is suggesting to restart, I'm just restarting it. In your console you will see what will happen. Okay, see, this is where application starting servlet engine and all thing, and then it will start deploying your batch 4 servlet programs or all the blah blah blah. Okay, okay, so let me go and see. My application is running at least. Okay, my application is running, right? HTTP localhost 8080/index.jsp. Sorry, you need to provide a server name. Okay, stupid. Okay, this is the simple request. This is the host name, this is the port that is running. My local server on 8080 Tomcat is running. This is the project. This is called a context. Okay, if you are running Google has Google Finance, Google Videos, Google Pictures, all this thing. This is the context, what kind of context, and then it is the index.jsp. If you look at index.jsp, it is the one, right? Let me say hello world, changing text, changing world. Okay, let me save it. Let me try to refresh. Hello world, changing world. Getting my point? So we haven't wrote any JSP page. It's a simple typical file. Here when you here you're going to have all the text area, all the something. When you submit it, the data will go all the way to register submit and blah 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 and save into the database. I'll show it to you tomorrow. Tomorrow mostly I'll try to take the class, but I'll let you know better later tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow we'll write login and JSP pages as well and see the flow, try to understand, and then what we can do, we can go to the theory concept so that you can better understand. If it is an in class, I would have been taught concepts and then program, but here, like, diagrams, all the blah blah stuff is very challenging, so that's the reason I'm started doing programming, and then I'll map it back to you theory. Okay, thanks guys.
Hello.
Yep,
Hi, Shiva.
tell me.
Can I have can I have the earlier class recordings, please? I don't know why. Unfortunately, I'm not getting the class mail. So